Okay, you were listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Thomas Walker Jr. and Carolyn Hines, residents and representatives of the Hardy-Williams Tenant Association. Councilmember Curtis Jones will join us again this week to discuss the FOP contract, and our own Lance Haver will update us on SEPTA, and Vanessa Maria Graber will report on immigration protests. So we have a packed show tonight, so let's get right to it. I'd like to introduce Thomas Walker Jr. and Carolyn Hines, residents and representatives of the Hardy-Williams Tenant Association. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about where you live and what you're dealing with here.
Well, I'll start first. I'm one of the tenants that lives on the very first floor next to the entrance way of the apartment, of the entire apartments. The double doors where there is an intercom on the outside of the building next to the door, and a person visiting can ring into whatever apartment that they need to contact and let them know that they're at the front door. And as I said before, I live on the first floor next to the very entrance way. And I've lived here for approximately 2 years, maybe a couple of months beyond that. And so that's all I'm going to say for right now, and I'll let Mr. Thomas introduce himself.
My name is Thomas Walker. I reside also here at 7100 Goldsworth Avenue, Hardy-Williams Veterans Building number 4. I've been here for 9 years, and the reason why we're trying to make this plea out to anybody is because we're not having agreement with the management on the things that we were promised when we first moved in here, such as security guards and computers and, mainly heat in the building. Packages have been missing. The main thing is security. If we had security, then a lot of this stuff wouldn't be going on. But it's a laundry list of what's happening here at 7100 Groves Avenue that should be addressed by someone. And we're just reaching out, trying to get anyone that feels like we do about seniors as ourselves, so because we're grandparents, and we're just trying to live out our lives, in a comfortable environment, so we're reaching out to anybody. This is why we're on here and any other place we can get a platform to air our grievances, because we went to management quite a few times, written instructions of our agreements, and nothing has been done. I've been here, like I said, for 9 years. We've had 3 tenant councils, and out of the time that the 3 that we've had, nothing has been done. And we need security. Like I said, it's a laundry list of things. It has to be addressed somewhere down the line. We have to take a stand somewhere because we're being treated like juveniles. I'm 71 years old. I don't feel like I should be told where I can go and where I cannot go in my home. This is my home. You come and work for 6, 8, 12 hours, whatever, and you go to your home. And I feel as though if you are sympathetic to seniors, then you would understand that we don't need our doors open wide, and won't lock, and no one comes, no police sitting outside. It's just a chaotic situation, and I'm praying that we can get this thing resolved before something really drastic happened to one of our residents.
So your home is managed by Help USA, an organization that I believe manages multiple living domiciles for people.
That is correct.
And what you're looking for: immediate improvements to security and emergency response, maintenance and sanitation, and restored access to common spaces. How long have you been talking to Help USA about this?
I'm going to say my first 2 years, I remember us going to them. Like I said, this is our third tenant council, so committee, so it's been a while and none of it's been done. There's a security booth, sir, at the beginning. I mean, at the beginning of the building, there's nobody in. There's never been anybody in. My 9 years here, maintenance use it for supplies, and that's a critical part of this building because without the security person here, we have all kind of vagrants and all kinds of street situations that shouldn't be happening inside. This is a senior citizens facility. I could see if it was a facility down on wherever. I'm not trying to knock anybody's neighborhood or nothing, but these are not young people that are here. So activities that's going on here shouldn't be going on here as far as I'm concerned. And with a security person in place, then a lot of these things would be addressed. Now, as far as like the maintenance and stuff like that, that's management again. We have sometimes poor trash collection. We have flies that came in. I mean, it's deplorable. I wouldn't want my grandmother living here. And I don't think they would want their grandmother living here under conditions as such we're living in. And all we are looking for is some sort of resolve. And we've been talking to them. I'm going to say in my 7 years, constantly. If it hadn't been one individual, it's been a group of individuals, but it just went unaddressed. And it seems like they get meaner and meaner the more we ask. I mean, our common spaces, when they first gave me the brochure to come to this place, they showed me what it was supposed to be like, and what it was going to be like. But when we got here, they were still working on the place. So, I'd say, well, they'll get the kinks out, But eventually, the kinks never got out, and they still are doing the same thing, And like I said, it's getting worse. The common spaces that we're supposed to have access to, such as the community room. This is where all of us should be right now talking to you, but we're not. We're up in the lounge, which is cold. There's no heat in here, and that's just terrible, And there's a patio to my left, and that we cannot go out on except for certain times of the day. Now, when you go home, I'm speaking of management now, then that means I can't go outside after 9 or whatever time. I never really looked at the time, but I know it's the time zone. Look at the time zone, but, I should be able to go out there when I get ready. I don't understand that. And then in the community room, I can't go there, and a lot of people don't have keys to the back door. You can't get in the back door. And when the front door is jammed, and a lot of times in the weather, when it's like hard weather, rain or whatever it is, cold weather, the doors does not work in the front. So you have people out there that's handicapped trying to get in, and if you had a security person in a security booth, then that wouldn't even happen. So, I mean, it just needs to be brought up to the surface that they are not holding up to their contract. Like I said, that brochure showed me a beautiful building, with a computer room. We ain't seen no computers. But I'm just saying, that's the least of the thing, We just need some security here, some safety. You have people in wheelchairs, and like I say, we have vagrants wandering the hallway, sleeping in the staircase. I could go on. Like I said, I could just go on to the point to where, I'd be at the end of your show, but I'm just hoping that someone will hear our plea and answer. We reached out to our representatives of this district, and so far we got a few phone calls back, and they said they was going to do this or that, but in the meantime, we still have to go on until, our main concern gets addressed, which is a security person, attendant, or anything. Yeah.
And as Mr. Thomas just stated, there is no one in the security booth. There's supposed to be someone in the security booth 24 hours a day. Since I live right next to the entranceway of the building, if people can't get in because of the fact that there's no one in there, if they see that my light on at night, they'll bang on my living room window. And if I don't answer right away, then come out of my apartment, go into the hallway and look and see who it is and let these individuals in. Here, some of them are coming into the building because they know certain ones that have not let them in for whatever reason. Some of them are delivery people if they come in even in the afternoon, and they don't have any way of leaving the delivery, UPS or FedEx or whatever. They will leave it outside on the ground. Then the people's packages get stolen.
Mhm.
So they try not to do that, especially if they see a light on. They know someone is at home in that apartment right by the front door, which is mine. And so I will open up the door. They come in. They'll put it in the mail room. That's not even any security, because sometimes unsavory people will come get into the building, and sometimes people's packages have been stolen even inside the building. So there needs to be more oversight for the facility, as it was supposed to be in the very beginning when they established this facility.
So I'd like to thank you both very much for being here with us tonight. And what I want to do is continue this conversation. I'd like to have you back soon so we can talk more about this, and you can let me know if there have been any follow-ups from management. We're going to reach out to Help USA and ask them some of the questions that we've been talking about here tonight. Is there anything that the community can do to support you right now?
Well, actually, we haven't been out in the community at this particular point because of the weather situation. But as it does get a little warmer, we would definitely employ the neighborhood if possible. Or there's a senior citizens center around on Elmwood that we would go protest to get their assistance or guidance or instruction on how we can handle this matter. But in the meantime, we haven't reached out.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep in touch. We want to know more about this, and we want to be able to do whatever we can to help. And we'll talk again really soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you. And that was Thomas Walker and Carolyn Hines, residents and representatives of the Hardy-Williams Tenant Association. We really always want to highlight things like this because these are everyday things that people are going through. And it's a real issue. And we're talking about senior citizens here. And these big organizations come in and run these places, and they don't follow through on the promises they made. We saw it with Bristol Shalom. We saw it in other places. Happens a lot. So we're always happy to have this discussion, and we will be following up with this. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray now.
Hi,
Denise,
good evening.
How are you today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Now, we're having Councilmember Curtis Jones on, I think, for the third week in a row.
He likes us. He really likes us.
He does. I don't think we've ever done that before. So tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about with Councilmember Jones today. What you talked to him about.
Well, what I talked to him about, if anyone read the Philadelphia Inquirer last week, there was a story in it where they interviewed the president of the FOP, Roosevelt Poplar, about what he would like to see in the police contract that's coming up. The current deal that the police have with the city expires soon because it was only a 1-year deal. And among the things that Mr. Poplar and his members would like to see is $100,000 home loan for new police officers since they're required to live in Philadelphia, the ability for police officers to live in New Jersey and Delaware, which is not Philadelphia, and most importantly, and what I talked to Councilmember Jones about, the FOP would like to no longer have it required that citizens know who the police officers involved in shootings were, and they'd also like to not be investigated by the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, the one that was just commissioned by the voters in a referendum, and the subject of my column in the newsletter this week. So I wanted to talk to Councilmember Jones because Councilmember Jones was the person who introduced the legislation that became CPOC. And I wanted to find out from him whether or not what city council's reaction would be if the FOP got what it wanted in terms of accountability.
All right. Well, here is Denise's interview with Councilmember Curtis Jones.
What are you hearing about the police contract negotiations? Are you involved in those at all?
Officially, no. Unofficially, I keep my ears to the City Hall grapevine. And so I try to on things that I invested a great deal in to find out what's going on. So, so anything that I tell you is third party, because I'm not allowed in the rooms, and nor would I want to be in the rooms. I mean, but the issues are in the rooms. Let me first say that, let me back up a bit and say that I believe since George Floyd, we are in a very different place in this city, at least. Not in the nation, we might be retro going backwards a bit. Diversity and inclusion stuff and, being woke, that's a new whistle dog word for those people who would send us back. But in Philadelphia, what I would say is the mayor, the police commissioner, the head of the FOP are operating in good faith. I understand that it is the FOP's job to represent their membership. It is the administration's job to represent the people and safeguard both the citizens in blue and the citizens that are me and you. And so that is a delicate balancing act. But I think what all parties agree is that we're in this boat together, that you cannot have a demoralized police force that doesn't want to do their job. You cannot have an angry populace that feels their rights are being infringed upon by law enforcement. And I think we have evolved to a point where people are really trying to do the right thing. Now, specifically what you talked about, I believe are some of the clauses about right to know this, that. Tell me exactly, and I'll deal with them one at a time.
Well, the ones that seem to be on the table are the ones where people find out the name of the officer is in an officer-involved shooting, whether or not certain pieces of investigatory, potentially investigatory things are made available to organizations like CPOC, and CPOC itself, whether or not it's able to do its job of investigating by like subpoenaing officers and expecting them to come to court and come before them. Those things are kind of a concern for people.
So let me blanket state that I am for having CPOC have all of those rights and abilities to do adequate investigation. So having said that, as a blanket response, what I would also say, trying to look, so I always try to look at what the other side's point is. I always try to balance that. In my senior status in council, I've learned how to do that. But if you think about, I do not ever want to put a officer's life in danger by letting out his address or, some certain things about where he is, or I think so. To some degree, based on the unique nature of the job that they do, I'll never forget. I was at Overbrook High School. What was the lady, the young man that was murdered? There was a young man that was involved in a police shooting and he died. And the people that came to the public hearing were polite, were professional, until the anguish of not knowing who that officer was that is accused of shooting their relative exploded in the outer hallway. You could hear this young lady scream to the top of her lungs about that injustice. So this is always an emotionally charged issue well before the investigations happen. And so safety is also something we need to be thinking about. So I'm gonna go back and say, I blanketly support the transparency aspects of all of this, except to the point where it may endanger an officer. So when I know one of them is prior records. I absolutely think that when you hire a police officer in the city of Philadelphia, where they came from, where they were accused of certain transgressions, brutality, misconduct, we should know. We should know because it's the right thing to do for the people, but it's also the right thing to do for our budget. Because at the point when you ignore those tendencies, then we are liable as well. Like you knew this guy or woman was a bad actor and you hired him anyway. So internally, there are certain things that CPOC needs to know in order to do a fair job of investigations.
Okay. Now, do you think that the fact that the police department is short of officers is going to impact how these things are negotiated? Because, let's face it, the FOP could easily say, you don't have enough officers. If you want us to help you get more officers, then you need to give us this. Do you think that could possibly be held over the city's head?
So that's why I'm glad I'm not in those rooms. I had enough with the Sixers. This is at another level. So I would say that I would hope that they would not do that for the sake of public safety, because they have to ride these streets and their families have to work, live, and play in our neighborhoods. So I hope that is not the case. But the reality, so I deal with them. I go up to the training facility and I talk to new officers all the time. And one of the issues is I talked to a veteran who was in the drop program, said, I'm out. African-American veteran of the 12th district. And we were talking and walking in Brother Stroll. And I asked him, well, why are you getting out? He said, because I'm between a rock and a hard place. My community doesn't embrace what I do. The administration has me out there in a space that I can't count on them often to get my back, and I'm not risking my pension over it. And I looked at him and I understood it is a difficult balancing act that our officers have to do. And as I get older and more mature and more vulnerable, quite frankly, I know that what they do is so important to the quality of my life. Like when I go to the ATM, I want them to be all they can be to protect me. And I'm not a rapper, but you feel what I'm saying, right? Mm-hmm. I have heard that caution can prevent them from zealously, not overzealously, but zealously doing their job. Should I stop this guy? Should I ignore what I just saw and complete my shift, or should I, earn my pay? And there are discussions like that every day. And so we have to find that balance. I told you in the beginning, we're in this together. And it is important. And I don't know if you noticed, the general attitude of the public has shifted from post-George Floyd to I just got carjacked. And although two things can be true at the same time, I want my rights to be preserved and protected, but I also want to be safe. Two things can be true at the same time. And the general public, you know, and I don't do scientific polls, I go to the barbershop polls though, I'm beginning to feel that. So we got to figure out how we not lose officers that when my grandkids say to me, I don't want to be no cop. There's a lot of reasons for those kinds of responses, but we need to work at them so that that community policing happens and that they're viewed as guardians and not gladiators. And that when I see an officer walking down the street, they're here to protect me. And I appreciate them. And that's a, you know, yeah, I'm being very idealistic, but that's the way it used to be in certain communities. Talk about before the turbulence of the 60s when we had beat cops that you knew their name.
Okay.
And they knew your name. And they knew the difference between a child having a bad day and there being a bad child. There is a difference. And, you know, the first time that you meet a juvenile shouldn't be when you're putting the cuffs on them. It should be at a PAL basketball league or something that we're doing in the community. If we can move a little closer to that, I think everybody benefits.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, council member. I really appreciate it. Actually, I just have one more little question for you. And it would be journalistic malpractice if I didn't ask it.
Okay.
On Monday, there's going to be a hearing in federal court to talk about whether or not the pause that the Trump administration placed on all federal funding, including stuff that Congress had already appropriated, is going to be allowed to move forward. Have you all been talking about how that will affect the city? And if so, do you have like a plan B in place to deal with certain things, like making sure that, you know, people who are eligible for food assistance get it, people who are eligible for rent assistance get it? Have you all started to formulate a plan B?
So here's the brilliance of the MAGA movement, Trump people, 2025 crew. They've been planning this for years.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't believe them. They meant what they were planning. And they released it, here's the brilliant part, all at once, over a week, from you know, freezes. They fired over 1,000 whistleblowers, which is interesting. They then gave these ultimatums to diversity inclusion staffers that said you can take the early buyout, and this federal freeze, which you're talking about, to kind of halt those kind of progressive activities right in their tracks. Well, so he was strategic and intentional in his design. So to answer your question, Ruth Landau had a meeting, a hearing about the deportation fears that people had been. Right after that, they started picking people up at Home Depot, picking people up at schools. Jimmy Harity had a hearing way back about a person who was an alien that did not have proper paperwork. He was rushed to a hospital. When they found out who he was, he woke up on a plane back to his country of origin. And we're putting a stop to those kinds of things. So when you say, is there a coherent plan? No, but crisis has made us start to put ourselves together. So organizations like the NAACP, organizations like the Urban League, organizations like Esperanza, all of these folks need to come together with their legal minds and start challenging these things in court.
Okay.
We need to put our petty differences aside because they're not playing. We need to battle this in the chambers where we Trump-proof our budget. PHA, Philadelphia Housing Authority, gets 80% of their dollars from HUD. Affordable housing is at risk. Just to mention one deal, PHA saved Briff Shalom, which was 300 people who would have otherwise been homeless. We are at the precipice of major sea change in philosophies. There is a code that they use now on TV and other actors. They say, "I ain't woke." And what that means is, the king is dead, long live the new king. And we have to be careful. We have to be strategic. And we have to be organized, like you said, to confront this. I'm a Pennsylvania Human Relations Commissioner. We had a case of sexual harassment where a immigrant was renting an apartment and the owner was trying to extort her for sex in order for her not to be iced out of here. We're in strange times.
Well, thank you again, council member. And please, keep us abreast of what's going on with both the police contract and with some of the things coming out of Washington, so that way we can get this out to our listeners and viewers, and they can know what they can do for themselves.
I'm going to end with this, that a lot of people that voted for Trump don't understand that they're going to be on the other end of the hatchet too, right? The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
All right, we'd like to thank Councilmember Curtis Jones for joining us, and he is absolutely right about that. You're seeing it already. So
yeah, and shortly after we finished that interview, the Office of Management and Budget on the federal level rescinded the memo that would have led to the freezing of federal funds. But what everybody needs to be on the lookout for, what everybody needs to be cognizant of, is this is not the last time we're going to hear about this kind of thing. This is not the last time that they're going to try to cut funding to, I don't know, just about everything. This isn't going to be it. So the city really everybody needs to really stay on top of this and to make sure they have a plan B.
Let me bring on Lance Haber, our consumer reporter. We're going to talk a little bit about that too. We might be switching up the order a little bit here, Lance, but go ahead.
I'm happy to continue the conversation. When we talk about the budget cuts on the federal level, I don't think people realize what it means. If the Medicaid is cut, it means that hospitals will not be paid for services. It means that your health insurance will go up. If LAHEAP is cut, it means that utilities, PECO, PGW, will not collect money from people who are struggling to keep their heads above water. And those utilities will not accept the loss. What they will do is they will raise their basic rates. So it means dramatic rate increases in gas and electric. If they cut SNAP or they cut WIC, Women and Children and Infants, what that means is that supermarkets that are in neighborhoods that are struggling will close, and you will have to drive farther to buy groceries. It puts at risk the produce markets in Reading Terminal, which is one of the largest recipients of SNAP of any place in the state. It puts at risk almost every community hospital in the state. And I know those of us who grew up in cities don't really appreciate this in the same way that those who grew up next to nowhere understand. But the community hospital has a fair amount of patients who can't pay. They don't have health insurance. They're relying upon Medicare or Medicaid. If they can't get the Medicaid payments, they're going to go under. And instead of it being a half an hour from where you live, you'll have to go an hour and a half. And what that means is if you're having a heart attack or you're having a stroke, it's a death sentence. Public transit, SEPTA gets most of its capital budget from the federal budget. We very proudly announced that they were going to they got a grant from President Biden. They were going to buy all new trains. That is gone. Our health centers here in the city of Philadelphia will be under tremendous pressure. All of those things are not being discussed, and all of those things are very real. Yes, it's also Meals on Wheels. Yes, it's subsidized housing. Yes, it's aid to families with dependent children. Yes, it's all of those things, but it's not just those things. It's also the utilities, the public transit, health insurance, hospitals, utility bills, health insurance. All of those things will skyrocket if money is taken out of the system and there's nothing to replace it with. So I think as we go forward, we really want to make sure that what we're doing is looking at a bigger picture and not just looking at who's not going to get it, but what happens when people don't get it and how that impacts the systems that have been built around it. PGW will go bankrupt without the LAHI program unless it can raise rates. PICO by law has to make a profit. That's what a regulated utility does. It's not a municipal utility. If they can't get LAHI, they will dramatically raise rates, especially in the suburbs where it's electric and gas. And that's really what we're looking at.
And one of the things I want to be very clear about, a lot of people have been looking at the city budget and have been saying, well, the city only gets 37 million in federal funding. It gets the operating budget gets 37 million in federal funding. You have to look at the other parts of the budget. The behavioral health budget in the city is well over $1 billion.
That's right.
The city only pays about 200 million of that. The rest comes from the federal and state government. That's what can we lose $800 million from that budget? No.
Every developer, I'm sorry, but every developer, when they make the argument, like when they made the argument for the arena boondoggle, what they say is, well, every dollar that you invest creates another partial job. Every job that's created creates another partial job. They call it the multiplier index. Well, those of us who study economics know that there's a negative multiplier index. If you lay off 1,000 workers, if you lay off 5,000 workers, those are 5,000 people who don't have money to spend for new cars, who can't go out to a restaurant, who can't have their kitchens redone, who can't replace their furniture or even their television sets. All of those economic impacts are very real and actually knowable, which is, again, part that makes it so hard to understand why we're not seeing it. Yes, the behavioral health care takes care of people who are struggling with what we call behavioral health now. We used to call mental health. Those people really struggle, and they'll be much worse off if the federal government doesn't fund it. But everybody who works there will lose their job, and everybody who loses their job will not be able to pay for their life any longer. They can't pay the utility bills, the rent, the mortgage, whatever it is, and that will have an impact on everybody going forward.
And that's what we're talking about here. And it's still unclear, at least to me, what's really happening here. When they say they rescinded the memo, that doesn't mean they rescinded the plan so much as it is. As a matter of fact, they've said that. Well, certain things are still going to happen. Well, nobody knows what this means. What I do know is that Medicaid got shut off yesterday. They said that they weren't going to do that, but they did it, and they had to turn it back on. And I'm really stunned by this. Maybe I shouldn't be, but it makes absolutely no sense, and it's just horrific.
I think for the people who were in favor of disruption, who said, the government is bad, the government is faulty, we have to disrupt it. And the fact that Trump is incompetent and doesn't really know how to manage government, and that he's just going to throw bombs everywhere and he's going to blow everything up. People don't understand what happens when you disrupt is you give power to the most powerful people. If you destroy something, who's going to be left to take it over? We have the model of the former Soviet Union. When the former Soviet Union collapsed and they started to sell off all of their businesses, the only people who had any money to buy the businesses were the criminals, the black marketeers. They were the ones who had the cash to buy the businesses. The most organized force in our society are the oligarchs. So if we disrupt government, we have to be realistic and understand that the oligarchs are going to come in and take it over. This is not a disruption that comes from a mass movement. This is not people in the streets with an ideology, with a belief system, who have been organizing for years to go forward. Yes, the system doesn't work for many of us, perhaps most of us. But if there's nothing in place, if there's no movement in place, if there's no way to put a better program in place after the disruption, then we have to expect that the wealthiest people who have the most resources and have the most forces are going to be the ones to put in place the system.
And we're going to continue to talk about this for a long time, because it's just going to keep happening. Let's bring it a little more local now, though, Lance. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with SEPTA.
So I went to the SEPTA board meeting. SEPTA says it's in trouble. There are a couple things. One is the key card system that costs twice as much as what it should cost. It was 2 years late. That doesn't do the things that it should do. SEPTA has decided, instead of suing the company that made it, instead of visiting with other public transit systems and seeing if they could borrow one of their own, they've decided to buy another key card called 2.0 for over $211 million. And this is kind of a curiosity, because SEPTA at the same time is saying they're broke and they're going to have to cut back on service, dramatic service cuts and dramatic fare increases. And on top of that, SEPTA is also announcing that they have all the money they need this year and they didn't have to raise fares. So I'm going to play a very brief video of the SEPTA board meeting, and people can hear for themselves how we're being drawn in two different directions, and how what SEPTA's goal is to really hold the riders hostage by saying, if the state doesn't give SEPTA the money it needs, it's going to take the service away from the riders. And that's where it is. So let's play that, and then we'll move on and keep an eye on that.
While the stopgap funding of $153 million provided by Governor Shapiro has temporarily filled our operating budget gap for fiscal year 25, the absence of a long-term funding solution means we face an ongoing and severe funding shortfall beginning July 1st, 2025. This projected gap will be reflected in the fiscal year 26 budget proposal now under development. Thank you.
However, we will not be able to cut our way out of this crisis. A permanent funding solution is needed. For the new fiscal year that starts on July 1, we will not budget on hope. We are preparing to make what will be very difficult decisions about fares and service.
This uncertainty makes it extremely difficult to plan for the future. With a large, multifaceted agency such as SEPTA, failing to act on critical procurements will have severe long-term impacts. Today, the SEPTA board will consider a capital improvement project that will bring much needed improvements to our fare payment and collection system, known as Key 2.0. And with the number of outages and other failures that we have with the current system, we can't afford not to move forward.
So there you see, the first person says, with the governor flexing the money, we have all the money we need. Then you hear the general manager say, we don't have any money, we're going broke, we can't budget with hope. We have to budget realistically, make difficult decisions. And then the SEPTA board decides, well, we may be broke, we may not have any money, but it's too much effort to sue the old company. It's too much effort to ask the metro system in New York or Boston or Chicago, hey, can we use your key card system? They go out and they give a $211 million contract to a company. When you go on their webpage, I will assure you that the executives that they put up on their webpage look nothing like the people who ride the system here in Philadelphia, not by race, not by gender, not even by age. And again, this is an example of, we went through the bus revolution where they spent lots of money bringing in technical experts to redo all of the bus routes, had lots of discussions about it, and then announced, we can't do it because we don't have enough money to operate. Now they're going to spend $211 million of our money, and then they're going to announce, we don't have enough money to do it. And this is especially difficult because if you heard, the chair is saying it's going to be a capital project, which means they're counting on Washington to get the money from. And of course, this is really questionable that President Trump is going to make any money available for public transit, let alone Philadelphia public transit, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he has accused Philadelphia and said bad things happen here.
Yeah.
So it defies belief. You know, we need public transit. It's very important to us. It's critical to the region, critical to the environment. Without SEPTA, even if if you commute by driving, you won't be able to drive anyplace. 700,000 rides a day. Let's say 400. Let's be nice and say a lot of people are going to carpool. So it's only 300,000 more cars ahead of you. And the unfortunate truth is, people who are struggling economically rarely buy new cars. And they rarely buy good used cars. More often they buy what they can afford. And those are the cars that tend to break down in front of you on the highway at rush hour. And if 10% of those cars break down, it's 30,000 cars on the Schuylkill Expressway, on the Blue Route, on the streets, making it impossible to commute. So we need public transit. We need it funded. 2 years ago, SEPTA came to the conclusion we could hold the riders hostage and say, if the state doesn't give us the money, we're going to raise fares and cut service. Didn't work. State legislators doesn't really care about us. SEPTA raised fares and cut service. Now, they cut service dishonestly. What they do is they don't hire enough bus drivers. So instead of announcing what routes they're going to cut, they have random outages. And, you know, they don't have enough bus drivers. Not the bus driver's fault. They don't have enough bus drivers, so they can't run the scheduled routes. And same system didn't work last year, and now they're trying it again. And it's a curiosity to me why they think that the legislature this year in Harrisburg, after a Trump win in Pennsylvania, is going to care more about inner city Philadelphia riders than they cared 2 years ago or last year. They have all the money they need. They still have $500 million in their slush fund and their fare stabilization fund. Again, people who listen carefully. SEPTA's treasurer says because the governor flexed the money, we have all the money we need this year, meaning they don't have to draw down on that fare stabilization fund. There's absolutely no reason for them to threaten us with fare increases, with service cuts. What they ought to do is say to the state, we refuse to do this to our riders. We're going to protect them. We're going to protect our environment. We're going to protect our businesses. We're going to protect our region. We're going to run the system until we run out of money, and then we'll give it to you. You figure out what to do with it next.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. We're going to be keeping an eye on SEPTA as we always do. Thank you for going to those meetings. I know you're going to keep doing it and keep telling people what's going on. It's really important. I'd like to bring in Vanessa Maria Graber now. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
Hello. Well, I'm hanging in there like everybody else. It's been a long January, and this week was no exception.
Yeah. So, Vanessa, tell us where you were over the weekend.
Well, this weekend I attended an event in Center City. It was put on by the New Sanctuary Movement, which is a local immigrants' rights organization. And it was called Choose Love, a call for Philly to defend sanctuary city policies. And it was an effort to make people aware about what was happening with the new policies from the Trump administration, the deportations and ICE raids that we have been seeing take place across the city. There were many members from interfaith organizations that were leading people in prayer and also calling on the mayor and our locally elected officials to take more of a stand to defend immigrants and to make sure that we continue to uphold Philly's sanctuary city policy. So I have a video of some of the speakers, and we can learn more about some of the things they were calling for. So I'm going to put that on in just a second.
My name is Reverend Jay Bergen. I'm the pastor at Germantown Mennonite Church up in Germantown. And myself and other clergy with the New Sanctuary Movement are here with members of our congregations and people from the community out here because this week has really shown that if we are going to get through the next 4 years as a city and as a community, our city leadership needs to step up. They need to do everything in their power to protect people in Philadelphia, whether those people are documented or undocumented, whether they're immigrants or whether they're born and raised Eagles fans. Like this is the time for our mayor, for our DA, for our city council to show us that we are the city of brotherly love, to show us what love looks like in public, to show us what sanctuary looks like in public, and to be loud and proud to be the city of Philadelphia, the city that loves everyone, and to stand up to the fascist and racist policies that are coming down from the White House. So that's what we're out here doing and saying with a crowd of several hundred people, just making it really clear that this is the city of brotherly love, and we expect our political leaders to act accordingly.
What's your message to people in your congregation, your neighbors, and people in Philadelphia that are seeing this, that care and they want to support somehow?
Absolutely. Well, we always say that love starts with loving our neighbors. So that means with looking out for people on your block, people in your workplace, people in your family who may be undocumented or who may be an immigrant and at threat of deportation. And we know that the policies of the Trump administration are going to impact not just immigrants, but anyone who's working class, anyone who's struggling, anyone who's just trying to get by. And so caring for each other, offering a helping hand is how it starts. It's how we build community, and it's how we build the power we need to actually create a city and a country that works for everyone.
And if folks would like more information or resources, where can they go?
Absolutely. You can visit New Sanctuary Movement, visit their website. They're also on social media, and they offer resources for immigrants, for faith communities, and for allies like myself who want to be in support.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
My name is Erika Guadalupe Nunez. I'm the director of Juntos. We are a community-led Latina immigrant rights organization in South Philadelphia. Since 2003, Juntos has fought for the rights of workers, parents, youth, and immigrants. So, as we saw earlier this week, right, Trump issued a series of executive orders meant to build a culture of fear, right? Such as canceling the sensitive locations memo, attempting to attack birthright citizenship, and enacting raids across the country. These actions are designed to terrorize immigrant communities and strip them of their basic humanity and rights. It needs to be really clear, right? At its core, the U.S. immigration system exists to violate the rights and dignities of our community. It contradicts everything Philadelphia claims to stand for as a city of brotherly love. And ICE has repeatedly shown blatant disregard for this city, our values, and our residents. This is not an agency deserving of respect or compliance. That's right. ICE is an agency that must be resisted, disempowered, and ultimately abolished. Esto no es una agencia que que merece respeto ni complemento. ICE es una agencia que debe ser resistido, desmantelado y en la última instancia abolida. Gracias. ¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí, se puede.
¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí, se puede.
¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí, se puede.
Jalen todo el mundo, jale. Rompe ese odio. Jale. Rompe ese miedo, rompe esa tristeza.
So Mayor Parker, we stand with you and we stand behind you in the spirit, as you have said, of Philadelphia, describing it as we will not give up.
Y usted, alcaldesa Parker, le recordamos que estamos parados aquí con usted y atrás de usted para hacer lo adecuado, de hacer lo que se debe y apoyar a sus ciudadanos.
So we call upon you, Mayor Parker. GTY. Let's get to yes.
Y entonces le llamamos a usted, alcaldesa Parker, que lleguemos así, get to yes.
All right, those were members of the New Sanctuary Movement and Juntos speaking to a crowd of demonstrators in front of Arch Street Methodist Church, and then later marching to Love Park. Part of the action, they took that big black piece of cloth that you saw, and they covered the Love Park sculpture. And they were talking about what it means, when we don't have love in our cities. And so that's why they ripped the cloth over there in the middle of the video. And so since Saturday, there have been ICE raids in Philadelphia and in the surrounding area. We confirmed yesterday that a car wash in Hunting Park, ICE came and detained 7 individuals. There was video evidence reports of that were circulated widely online. They're still trying to figure out what is happening with those detainees and if they are going to be sent into immigrant detention or held elsewhere. In the surrounding area today, this morning, ICE showed up to a supermarket, the Farmers Market it's called, in Norristown, and also ICE came to a apartment complex, Creekside apartment complex in Bensalem, and also detained a number of individuals. I actually spoke to eyewitnesses who were at the apartment complex, who are tenants of those apartments, who told me exactly what they saw. They were very scared. They said there were more than 15 vehicles. They were unmarked. And earlier that day, the sheriffs came to enact warrants that they had on 2 individuals. And then shortly after that, ICE came. So there was a bit of confusion in trying to identify who those agents were. And then yesterday, ICE also came to a Puerto Rican restaurant. It's called Boricua Restaurant, located in the Port Richmond area of the city. I spoke to the owner, Hector Serrano, yesterday, who confirmed that ICE agents came asking to go into their kitchen and check the kitchen for undocumented workers. And because they knew their rights, they told them that they could not enter without a warrant. And so I think right now what the immigrant community is trying to do is widely circulate information about knowing your rights, how to document and verify these reports, and keep everybody safe. So as these things continue, we'll continue reporting on it and keeping everybody up to date.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa. And we'll be back next week on Hall Monitor.